Oh my gosh, that was absolutely incredible. I can't believe we finally saw it. I've been waiting for weeks. What did you think, Daniel? And be honest, because I have a lot of feelings about this one, and I really want to know if you felt the same way I did. The whole experience was just amazing from start to finish.
Honestly, I liked it, but I didn't love it. I know that might not be what you want to hear, but I'm being truthful. It was entertaining, sure, but it felt a bit too long for me. There were moments where I was checking how much time was left. That said, I can totally see why people are excited about it. It had some genuinely great moments. What specifically made it so incredible for you?
Too long? Really? I was completely on the edge of my seat the whole time. That phrase means you feel so tense and excited that you literally can't sit back and relax. I never once felt bored. Especially during that car chase scene in the third quarter. My heart was pounding. The music, the camera angles, the speed, everything came together perfectly. How could you feel like it dragged when scenes like that existed?
Okay, yeah, that car chase scene was amazing. I'll give you that. Meaning I fully admit that point is correct. The special effects in that sequence were completely out of this world. That phrase means something is so impressive, it seems almost unreal or unbelievable. But I still felt like the story dragged a little in the middle section. It slowed down noticeably, and I lost a bit of momentum there. Did you not notice that at all?
I can kind of see what you mean, actually. That phrase is useful when you partially agree with someone without fully agreeing. The second act, which is the middle section of the film, did slow down a bit compared to the opening. But I personally thought that slower pace was intentional. It helped build tension and let us understand the characters better before everything exploded in the final act. Without that breathing room, the ending wouldn't have hit as hard, don't you think?
That's actually a fair point about the pacing being intentional. Good filmmakers do use quieter moments to set up bigger payoffs later. Maybe I was just impatient. But speaking of the ending, did you see that plot twist coming? A twist is an unexpected turn in the story that surprises the audience. Because I was completely caught off guard, which means I was totally surprised by something I did not expect at all. I had no warning whatsoever.
No way. Absolutely not. I had zero idea that was coming. When she turned out to be the villain the whole time, my jaw literally dropped. That expression means your mouth falls open from complete shock and surprise. I remember sitting there just staring at the screen with my mouth open, completely unable to process what was happening. The person sitting next to me probably thought something was wrong with me. Did you have any suspicions at all before it was revealed?
Not at the moment it happened, no. But right? Looking back, and that phrase means reflecting on something that has already happened with more understanding. There were so many clues and hints scattered throughout the film. The way she always disappeared right before something bad happened. That suspicious phone call in the first act. I should have put it together much earlier. Great screenwriters plant seeds like that early on, so you can enjoy discovering them on a rewatch.
Exactly. That is precisely what I love about great screenwriting. And screenwriting means the craft of writing the script and story for a film. Every single detail pays off in the end, meaning every small thing you saw earlier becomes important and satisfying later. Nothing was random. It all had a purpose. That level of careful planning is what separates a good movie from a great one. Speaking of which, what did you think of the lead actor? His performance really stood out to me.
He was solid, and I use that word to mean reliably good, competent, and dependable without necessarily being exceptional. Not his absolute best performance, in my opinion, but definitely solid for this type of role. I actually think his work in that quiet drama he did last year was more emotionally impressive. He had less action and more dialogue to work with there, and he really shone in those quieter moments. What about you? How did you feel about him in this particular film?
I totally disagree with you there, and I want to say this politely because it's completely okay to have different opinions. I thought he was absolutely fantastic in this role. The emotional scenes were so convincing and believable. You completely forgot you were watching an actor. He really carried the film, which means he was the main driving force that made the whole movie work. Without his performance holding everything together, I don't think the story would have landed the same way. He was the emotional anchor.
Fair enough. That's a great phrase to use when you accept that someone else has a different view and you respect it without needing to argue. You make a strong case for his performance, especially about the emotional anchor point. I think we clearly got different things out of this film, and that's totally fine. Sometimes your personal connection to a story affects how you judge the performances. Are you hungry at all? Want to grab a bite somewhere nearby and keep this conversation going?
Absolutely yes. Grab a bite is a really natural, informal way to say, go eat something. And I love that phrase. I could honestly talk about this film all night long. There's so much more I want to analyze and discuss. There's actually a really cozy cafe just around the corner from here. They have great coffee and snacks, and it's never too crowded after evening screenings. We can sit down properly and really dig into the details. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds perfect to me. A cafe nearby is exactly what I need right now. Before we head out, though, I have one more question about the film itself. Would you say it's worth seeing again? Some movies you enjoy once, and that's enough, but others reward you with new details every time you watch them. Based on everything you've said about the clues and the screenwriting, would you actually sit through this one a second time?
Definitely worth a second watch, without any doubt. And actually, knowing the twist ending now makes it a completely different and richer experience the second time around. You pick up on details you completely missed the first time. All those little hints the screenwriter planted will suddenly stand out. I'd absolutely call it a must-see, which is a strong way of saying something is so good that everyone should watch it. You might even enjoy it more the second time than you did today.
A must-see. I like that. Okay, you've convinced me to give it another chance at some point. I think watching it with the twist in mind would genuinely change how I interpret every scene. You know, this is something I find really interesting about film as an art form. The same movie can feel completely different depending on what you already know going in. Context changes everything. Do you think knowing the ending actually makes a movie better or worse for most people in general?
That is such a great question, and it really divides people. Some viewers feel that a spoiler, which means knowing plot details before watching, completely ruins the experience and destroys the surprise. But there's actually research suggesting that knowing the ending can make people enjoy a story more, because they can focus on how everything is crafted rather than just worrying about what happens next. For me personally, it depends on the type of film. For this one, I think the second viewing would be richer and more rewarding.
That research point is really interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way before. It makes sense that when you're not anxious about the plot outcome, you have mental space to appreciate the cinematography, dialogue, and acting choices. Cinematography, by the way, refers to the visual style and how a film is shot, the camera angles, lighting, and composition. This film had really striking cinematography in several scenes. That underground tunnel sequence especially was visually stunning. Did that stand out to you too?
Yes, the tunnel sequence was visually breathtaking. The contrast between the darkness and those bursts of emergency light created such a dramatic atmosphere. You could really feel the danger and claustrophobia. That's the feeling of being trapped in a tight, enclosed space. I think the director made very deliberate choices with light and shadow throughout the whole film. It wasn't just pretty to look at. The visual style was actually telling part of the story on its own. That's what separates a technically skilled film from an artistically meaningful one.
You're speaking my language now. As a teacher, I really appreciate when art communicates meaning through multiple layers at once. When the visuals and the story work together harmoniously, that's what we might call cohesion. Everything serves the same purpose and supports the same themes. This film did seem to have that quality in its strongest moments. Though I'll be honest, I didn't consciously think about the cinematography while watching. I was just reacting emotionally. Do you always analyze films while you watch them, or does it happen after?
Honestly, it's both. During the film, I'm fully emotionally immersed, meaning I'm completely absorbed in the story and just feeling everything. But there's always this small part of my brain that notices technical things automatically because I watch so many films. It's a bit like how you probably notice grammar mistakes in writing automatically as a teacher, even when you're just casually reading for fun. Film analysis has just become second nature to me over the years. Oh, look, there's the cafe. Should we go in?
Ha, yes, that's a very accurate comparison. I absolutely do notice grammar mistakes in everything I read, even when I'm trying to relax. That's a funny professional habit. And yes, let's definitely go in. It looks really welcoming and warm in there. The cafe looks like exactly what we need after all that intensity. Thinking about professional habits, do you think your background in graphic design affects how you experience films visually? That must give you a really unique perspective.
100% yes. My design background means I'm very sensitive to color palettes, composition, and visual hierarchy in everything I look at, and films are no exception. For example, I noticed that every scene with the villain used very cool desaturated colors, blues and grays, while the scenes showing warmth and safety used warmer oranges and yellows. That kind of color grading, which means adjusting colors in post-production, was a subtle clue about who to trust throughout the story. Most viewers feel it subconsciously without realizing why.
That's genuinely fascinating. I would never have consciously identified the color patterns, but now that you describe it, I can absolutely recall feeling differently about certain scenes without knowing why. That's the power of good visual design. It communicates to you on a level beneath your conscious awareness. This is exactly why having someone like you to watch films with is valuable. You point out things I'd completely miss on my own. What would you like to order? I'm thinking a flat white coffee.
A flat white sounds perfect. I'll probably have the same. And maybe a pastry to share? I always get hungry after a long film for some reason. But yes, going back to what you said, I think films are so much richer when you watch them with people who notice different things. You caught the narrative clues I might have glossed over, and I caught the visual signals you missed. Together, we basically experienced the full film. That's why watching movies with other people and then discussing them is so valuable.
Absolutely well said. And this connects to something I think about with my students too. Learning and understanding deepen significantly when you discuss things with others rather than just processing them alone in your head. It's the same principle whether you're analyzing a film or studying a difficult concept. Talking it through forces you to articulate your thoughts clearly, and that process of articulation, putting your ideas into words, often reveals what you actually think or believe. Did you have anyone else in mind you'd recommend this film to?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I'd recommend it to anyone who enjoys a well-crafted thriller with genuine emotional depth. A thriller, just to define it, is a genre of film designed to create suspense, excitement, and tension in the audience. I'm thinking specifically of my friend Sarah, who loves psychological thrillers, films that mess with your mind and make you question what's real. She would absolutely love the twist ending. I'm also thinking about my sister, but she gets easily scared, so I'd have to warn her about the intense action sequences first. Who would you suggest it to?
Honestly, I'd probably recommend it to some of my older students who are interested in film and storytelling. I sometimes share cultural recommendations with them as conversation starters. Beyond that, I'd tell my brother. He's a huge fan of action films in general, and he particularly loves when a film has a genuine emotional story running underneath all the action. He always complains that modern action films are all spectacle with no substance, meaning impressive visuals but no meaningful content. This one has both, which makes it stand out.
Spectacle with no substance. That is such a perfect way to describe what's wrong with a lot of blockbuster films today. A blockbuster is a very big budget film designed to be a massive commercial success, and many of them sacrifice storytelling for impressive visuals. This film managed to balance both really well, which is genuinely rare. The action was thrilling, but it also meant something emotionally. Every fight scene, every chase was tied to a character's inner journey. That's what elevated it from being just entertainment to being genuinely good cinema.
Elevated is a great word choice there. It means raised to a higher level or standard. And you're right, the character journey gave the action scenes real stakes. Stakes in storytelling refers to what a character stands to lose if things go wrong. If we don't care about a character emotionally, we don't care whether they survive the action. But because this film made us genuinely invested in the lead from early on, every dangerous moment felt meaningful. That's smart filmmaking. How long do you think it took to write and plan something like this?
A well-structured screenplay like this one could easily take a year or more to write, revise, and refine. Screenwriters often go through dozens of drafts before anything is greenlit, and greenlit means officially approved for production by a studio. The structure has to be airtight, meaning every scene needs to serve a purpose, all the character motivations need to make sense, and the clues have to be planted naturally without being too obvious or too hidden. That balance is incredibly difficult to achieve. It's an art form that I think people really underestimate and don't give enough credit to.
I really do underestimate it, I'll admit. As someone who teaches writing, I know how hard it is just to write a clear essay or story. Translating that to a feature-length screenplay that also has to work visually and keep an audience engaged for 2+ hours sounds incredibly daunting. Daunting means something that seems intimidating or challenging before you attempt it. Do you think the direction, meaning the director's vision and decisions on set, was as strong as the writing, or did you feel one was stronger than the other in this particular film?
That's a really nuanced question. Nuanced means involving subtle and important distinctions. I think the direction was excellent, but actually slightly stronger than the writing in this case. There were a couple of moments in the dialogue that felt a little clunky, meaning awkward or unnatural, particularly in the second act during the romantic subplot. But the director turned some of those weaker written moments into visually compelling scenes through creative camera choices and strong performances. A great director can sometimes save mediocre writing, and vice versa.
Vice versa is a useful Latin phrase that means the reverse is also true. So in this case, great writing can sometimes save mediocre direction. That's a really insightful observation about the different roles in filmmaking. I noticed the romantic subplot too, and I have to say I found it a little underdeveloped. Underdeveloped means it wasn't given enough time or depth to feel fully realized. It felt like it was there to add emotional stakes, but the film didn't quite commit to exploring it properly. Did the romantic subplot bother you, or was it just a minor issue?
It was a minor issue for me. I wouldn't say it bothered me significantly, but I agree it could have been handled with more care. Romantic subplots in action thrillers are often the weakest element because they feel obligatory rather than organic. Organic in this context means arising naturally from the story rather than being forced in. The best romances in films feel inevitable, like these two people were always going to find each other given who they are. This one felt a bit more like a box that needed checking, but it didn't derail the film for me overall.
Derail is such a vivid word. It means to cause something to go off track or fail completely, like a train going off its rails. And you're right, one weak subplot doesn't derail an otherwise strong film. That's actually good critical thinking, being able to identify weaknesses in something you enjoy without letting those weaknesses define your overall reaction. A lot of people either love everything about a film or hate everything about it. Being able to say this was great, this was weak, and here's why is a really mature and useful way to think about any creative work.
Absolutely. That kind of nuanced evaluation, rather than all or nothing thinking, is actually a really valuable life skill, not just useful for film criticism. When you can separate the parts of something and assess each one individually, you develop much clearer thinking overall. I try to apply that to my design work too. What's working, what isn't, and why. It makes you better at both creating and consuming art. By the way, did the soundtrack stand out to you at all? I thought the musical score was phenomenal throughout.
The soundtrack. Yes, I actually noticed it more consciously than I usually do, which is saying something because I typically don't pay much attention to film music. The score during the final confrontation was genuinely powerful. A musical score, just to clarify, is the original music composed specifically for a film, as opposed to licensed songs that already existed. This composer really understood that less is sometimes more. There were extended moments of near silence before the music swelled dramatically, and that contrast made the emotional impact so much stronger. Did you know who composed it?
I actually do. I looked it up before we went because I recognized the composer's name from the trailer. She's done several critically acclaimed films in the past few years, and critically acclaimed means widely praised by professional critics and reviewers. I think she's one of the most exciting film composers working right now. Her ability to use silence as a dramatic tool, exactly as you described, is really distinctive. She doesn't oversaturate scenes with music. Instead, she lets the sound breathe, which makes the moments when the music does arrive feel so much more powerful and emotional.
Oversaturate. I love that word in this context. It means overwhelming something with too much of one element until it loses its effectiveness. You can oversaturate a film with music the same way you can oversaturate a photograph with too much color. And your point about letting the sound breathe is really poetic. It reminds me of how good teachers also know when to stop talking and let students sit with silence to process information. Restraint, the ability to hold back and not overdo something, is a really underrated quality in both teaching and art.
Restraint is absolutely underrated. What a perfect connection you made there between teaching and filmmaking. The best artists in any field know not only what to include, but what to leave out. In graphic design, we call this the concept of negative space, the empty areas around an object that are just as important as the object itself. A design that tries to fill every inch of space becomes overwhelming and loses its message. Films that try to fill every moment with sound, action, and dialogue have the same problem. This film understood when to pause and let the audience feel something.
Negative space. That's a concept I understand from art classes, but never fully applied to film or music before. It's a great mental model. You know, we've been talking for a while now, and I feel like we've covered a huge amount of ground, from the plot twist to the cinematography, from the soundtrack to design principles. This is genuinely one of the most enriching conversations I've had after a film in a long time. I think this is why you watch so many films. They give you so much to think and talk about. Do you always have post-film conversations like this?
Always. A film without a post-film conversation feels incomplete to me. The watching is only part of the experience. The discussion afterward is where you really deepen your understanding and appreciation. It's like the difference between reading a book alone and reading it as part of a book club, where everyone shares their interpretations. Multiple perspectives multiply the richness of the experience. I always feel like I've watched two different films after talking with someone, the one I saw and the one they saw. It's genuinely one of my favorite things.
That's a beautiful way of framing it, watching two films in one by discussing it with someone else. I think I'll start seeking out more of these conversations after films rather than just going home and moving on with my evening. I have one more thing I'm curious about, though. Given everything we've discussed, the strong twist, the excellent direction, the outstanding score, and the powerful lead performance, if you had to give this film a rating out of 10, what would you give it? And more importantly, what's holding it back from a perfect score?
Ooh, I love a rating question. Okay, I'd give it an 8 out of 10, and I'm being thoughtful about that rather than just giving it a perfect 10 from pure enthusiasm. What's holding it back? Mainly the underdeveloped romantic subplot we discussed, and a few moments in the second act where the pacing slipped slightly. Also, and this is a minor point, I thought one supporting character was completely wasted. She was introduced with so much mystery and potential, and then just disappeared from the story without any real resolution. That felt like a missed opportunity.
8 out of 10 sounds very fair based on everything you've said. I'd probably give it a 7, slightly more cautious than you, because the pacing issues affected my experience more than they did yours. But I think a 7 is still genuinely good. It means something significantly above average and worth your time. Too many people equate anything less than a 10 with failure, but a 7 out of 10 film is a quality experience. And honestly, this conversation has made me appreciate the film more than I did when we first walked out. That's the power of good discussion.
Yes, that is exactly it. The conversation has given me more appreciation too, even though I already loved it. Hearing your critiques made me think more carefully about the elements I was just emotionally swept up in. And I think that's a really important vocabulary point for learners. To critique something doesn't mean to be negative or harsh. A critique is a detailed analysis that examines both strengths and weaknesses fairly. Constructive criticism helps us understand things better. I feel like we gave this film a very fair and thorough critique tonight, don't you?
Very fair and very thorough, I'd say so. We covered plot, character, performance, cinematography, soundtrack, pacing, screenplay structure, and even design principles. That's a remarkably comprehensive film analysis for a casual cafe conversation. I think if someone listened to our whole discussion, they would have a really solid understanding of what the film does well and where it falls short. That's honestly better analysis than a lot of written film reviews manage to achieve. You should consider writing film reviews professionally. Your passion and analytical mind would make you very good at it.
Oh, that is such a kind thing to say. I've actually thought about it, believe it or not. Writing film reviews combines my two great loves, films and visual communication, and I think I'd find it really fulfilling. Fulfilling means deeply satisfying in a way that feels meaningful and purposeful. Maybe I'll start a small blog or social media page dedicated to film analysis from a graphic designer's perspective. I could focus on the visual storytelling and design elements that most reviewers overlook. It would be a really unique angle. Would you read it if I started one?
Would I read it? Absolutely, without any hesitation. Especially after this conversation, I can genuinely say your perspective on film is both unique and enlightening. Enlightening means it makes things clearer and gives you new understanding you didn't have before. I think a lot of people would find a designer's perspective on film really fresh and interesting. You should definitely go for it. And I volunteer to be your first official reader and feedback provider. You can always use me as a sounding board. That's someone you test ideas on to get honest reactions before sharing them more widely.
A sounding board. I love that. And yes, I am absolutely taking you up on that offer. You're the perfect sounding board because you're thoughtful, honest, and you don't just agree with everything I say. You challenged me tonight in really productive ways, and that made the conversation so much better. The best discussions always involve some disagreement, not conflict, but genuine differences of perspective that push each other's thinking forward. I think we should make this a regular thing. See a film, go for coffee, have a proper conversation about it. What do you think?
I think that is a genuinely wonderful idea, and I'm completely on board. On board means you agree and are ready to participate in something enthusiastically. Let's make it a proper monthly tradition. We pick a film, both watch it, and then meet here for coffee and a real discussion. We don't even have to agree on what film to pick. In fact, taking turns choosing might lead to even more interesting conversations since we'd be watching outside our usual preferences. I'll even start looking up what's coming out next month so we can plan ahead. Deal?
Deal. That is absolutely a deal. I love the idea of taking turns choosing. It's a great way to expand your horizons, which means to discover and appreciate things beyond your usual comfort zone. I'd probably pick something with strong visual storytelling, and you might pick something more character-driven and dialogue-heavy, and we'd both grow from watching the other's choice. This is what I love most about friendships, when you genuinely expand each other's world. Tonight was really great, Daniel. Not just the film, but all of this. Thank you for coming with me.
Thank you for dragging me out tonight. And I mean that in the best possible way. I almost canceled because I was tired from work, but I'm really glad I came. This evening reminded me of why it's so important to stay curious and engage with art and culture, even when you're busy. Every good experience like this adds something to your life and broadens your perspective. I think our English learning listeners today got a lot of great vocabulary and phrases from our conversation too, from must see and carried the film all the way to sounding board and expand your horizons. A pretty productive cafe visit all around.